This show is created for you by the media team of the Accounting Association at Cal State Northridge. Welcome to AA podcast number 7 this semester, the show where we explore the accounting world one asset and liability at a time. My name is Mariana, and today we wanted to talk more about the SLPs and internships. Michael and Anika are here with me. Also, Tyler is here, and then our guest, Dung will be joining us as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dung. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm currently a senior majoring in professional accountancy. I transferred into CSUN during fall 2019 from Pasadena City College.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that, Dung. And let's shift gears towards SLPs and the internships.
Sure, so let's go over the difference between SLPs and internships. Let's go ahead and start with SLPs. So SLPs are summer leadership programs or summer breakthrough programs. They're generally about 1 to 2 days long, and you can actually attend multiple of them. So it's a great opportunity to network with professionals, get to know more about the firm. And some SLPs will actually put you through group activities or even just team building exercises. There's a very big emphasis on team building when it comes down to SLPs. So if you do plan on attending them in the future, make sure that you do keep this in mind. Now let's go ahead and talk about internships. So internships are generally about 2 to 8 weeks, especially because we are in a virtual environment right now. Internships are actually going to be shorter rather than longer, just due to a variety of reasons. And the difference between internships and SLPs is that you're actually going to be going through daily accounting activities. You're going to be working 9 to 5. It's not just going to be a 1 to 2 day program. It's going to be 4 to 5 days a week for a couple of weeks, and you're going to get used to what staff level accountants will actually have to do. Depending on if you're going into audit or tax, you're going to be given various programs to go over. Just to touch on it very briefly, we were given a computer with a couple of tax programs because I was doing the tax internship. And so we got training on some of those programs, and we did some of the work. And so throughout the summer, we definitely got used to using some of the programs that some of the senior accountants were very experienced using. Depending on if you go to Big Four, mid-tier, or local firms, you're going to have a completely different experience. So do keep that in mind when you are recruiting and when it ultimately comes down to making a decision.
All right, perfect. And just to clarify, how are the two connected? Do you have to do an SLP in order to get an internship?
So you don't have to do an SLP in order to get an internship, although I know that some firms moving forward are actually combining SLP offers with internship offers. So if you do get that SLP, the internship is actually part of the same deal, which is actually really cool. But I know this is not the case for every single firm, so keep that in mind. Some firms just do SLPs as standalones. Some firms do SLPs with the intention of offering certain candidates the internship offer. It just really depends.
Right, so there's definitely something you want to ask the professionals about before applying. And now the question is for Dung. I know that I was scrolling through your LinkedIn and I saw that you did quite a few SLPs. Can you tell us which ones you did, please?
So this past summer, I actually did 5 SLPs, and they were all virtual. So I did an SLP with Armanino, Cohn-Resnick, Deloitte, EY, and KPMG. And last summer, before I transferred into CSUN, I actually did one in-person SLP with Crost, and that's where I met Michael for the first time. So I'm currently signed with Cohn-Resnick for a winter internship and EY for a summer internship, and both of my offers are intact.
Got it. And so with the SLPs that you did already, how was your experience? They were all virtual, right?
Yeah, so all the summer leadership programs I did this past summer were all virtual, but the one I did last summer with Crost was in person.
And would you say that it's a really big difference between the in-person ones and the virtual ones?
I feel like the difference between the two, like the content was very different, but that also kind of varies from firm to firm. So for the in-person one, there was a lot more like stimulations and like more hands-on things. And you see like during like a virtual environment, you can't really do anything that's really like hands-on. So it's more of like informative meetings as well as like more fun activities, just so that you could network and get to know people more.
And before the SLPs, did you do anything to prepare for those?
Truthfully speaking, I don't think I did anything to prepare for like any of my SLPs. There were some that would tell you to like, hey, complete this little survey before this event is coming up. But I really think the virtual switch kind of took some firms by surprise. But given the circumstances, I feel like everybody handled it really well. I really did enjoy the SLP events and had so much fun networking. Some of the events were really informative, and I got to learn a lot about the resources within the firms. But in addition to that, a lot of the events were also like fun activities, similar to the social events that the student activities directors have been doing this semester. I was able to do events like a workout class, painting, scavenger hunts, and trivia. I was able to network with students from USC and UCLA throughout these events as well. So it's not just about meeting professionals, it's also about meeting your potential start class. I know Zoom calls can get exhausting, but what I would really recommend to everybody that's doing like any SLPs or any events with these firms is to just stay engaged in the conversation and just try to like keep smiling. And if I met anybody during events that I wanted to further connect with, I would just get their contact information and follow up to ask if I could schedule like a one-on-one call with them just to get more about their experience.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that, Dung. And I know you mentioned that you did one with Michael. So, Michael, I've also heard that you recently did a virtual one. Can you tell us more about the experience, the difference, and how did you prepare?
I think that preparing for an SLP is like preparing for an exam. You prepare by accumulating experience and confidence, by networking and getting used to talking to people months before you start even applying for the SLP. In the pre-quarantine days, that meant attending meetings and networking events and talking to professionals and getting their contact information. Nowadays, you prepare by going to Zoom meetings and getting used to talking to your webcam and making sure that your lighting is good and your background is clean. During my in-person SLP, I had icebreakers with other students and I was introduced to the professionals at the firm. We had a presentation about the operations of the firm and the various career paths available. We also went through an audit simulation and we had a firm tour followed by a networking session. By attending that SLP, I got to see a lot of people who aren't normally engaged in networking events, so I believe I got to see a better representation of what the work dynamic is like within the firm. In my virtual SLP, I attended a virtual conference call with other students from across the nation, and then after that, I was invited to attend a coffee chat with some partners at my local office. I believe that there were about 2 to 3 partners and 4 to 5 students. Getting to watch professionals in their work environment was one of the highlights of the in-person SLP, but virtual SLPs were much less intimidating, and I felt that I was better able to express my personality, although your mileage may vary.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for sharing that. I'm really glad to hear that the fact that your SLP was virtual was a positive experience for you. And I was really wondering, Anika, I know that for you, your internship being virtual was kind of a surprise. Can you tell us how was the experience and what are your overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, so since my internship was virtual, it ended up being cut down to 1 month. It was supposed to be 2 months, but then they cut it down to a month because no one expected COVID to hit and there wasn't enough time for firms to decide what to do. But overall, I still ended up having a great experience. If I was ever stuck on something, rather than walking a few steps to ask someone a question, I was still able to quickly give someone a call or message and they were always there to help me. I also got to work with other interns as well throughout the internship, which was great. And I made like a lot of friends.
Would you say that you felt like it could have been a little less intimidating since you didn't have to do it in person?
I think that since it was virtual, I was more like calm about it. And if it was in person, I feel like it would be a little bit more like I would be more anxious. But since it was virtual, I felt more chill about it.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. So far, it sounds like virtual internships and SLPs are a little less stressful. Tyler, how about you? I know that you have completed an SLP and an internship with Co-Resnick, but one was in person and the other was virtual. How did that affect your experience?
So yeah, the SLP being in person and the virtual internship was not something I was expecting. I honestly thought that our internship was going to get canceled just due to COVID, but thankfully Resnick was able to pull an amazing program together. Essentially, we just got our intern computers and we just worked on those the entire time throughout the program. My internship was about 5 weeks long. And so the first week was like a lot of informational meetings, which was, I'm not going to lie, it's kind of boring. You have to have your webcam on and you have to, be paying attention. It's a lot of information, like total information overload. But once you make it through that first week, then you really start diving into some of the activities, some of the scheduled events. You get paired up with a mentor, a co-resnick Resnick buddy. And then from there, they kind of assign you work, various assignments and tasks. It's not super heavy either. It's definitely good entry work.
All right. Well, let me ask you, Tyler. So it sounds like you had a really good experience with the internship, but how about if you felt prepared beforehand? And did you do anything to get ready for one?
That is a great question, Mariana. To be honest, I felt like it was really difficult to prepare for the internship. I didn't really know what to expect going into it. I mean, you can ask all the questions you want about audit or tax, but until you actually start doing the work, it's really hard to get an idea or even prepare yourself. One very important thing that I think a lot of professionals will recommend to you is to actually familiarize yourself with Excel. So if anything, definitely put an emphasis on that if you are preparing for the internship. Although if I'm being completely honest, you're going to be thrown a lot of brand new software. So just keep an open mind in general. Just be willing to learn, make mistakes, and ask a lot of questions.
I think this question is something that a lot of people are wondering about. For you personally, do you feel like you are more prepared to go into the field now after you have completed your internship?
So I feel like getting familiarized with some of the accounting software definitely did help. Working 9 to 5 and just kind of adjusting yourself to that environment really does help a little bit too. Although preparing myself for what is going to be busy season, I can't honestly say that I am prepared for that, but I don't think anybody is. I think at the end of the day, I won't really know how prepared I am until I actually go through my first busy season. I think that's when most staff accountants really find out if they can actually handle accounting as a career. So I'm keeping an open mind to it. I mean, my plan after I graduate is to honestly get my CPA done with before I even start working. Of course, fingers crossed I can actually make that happen, but I'm hoping that the information that I learned from studying for the CPA is also going to get me ready for what I'm going to experience in the workforce as well.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Tyler. And Dung, I really have this question for you. You have mentioned that you are planning on doing multiple internships, and that is something I was always wondering about. How did you communicate it to the firms?
I think that's a great question. And I definitely think it's really important to do multiple internships just so that you're able to get kind of like a better grasp of your profession. So I actually received my winter internship offer after I got all my other summer internship offers. And so once I got that winter offer, I contacted all of my recruiters and I scheduled a phone call with them to discuss if it would be okay for me to do a winter internship with one firm and then a summer internship with them. And this is honestly so much easier said than done, just because like sometimes you don't know how firms are going to react to that and if they're going to be okay with you doing doing multiple internships. But the key thing to remember is open communication is key. And I think it's better to communicate everything to your firms rather than leave them in the dark.
Right. And then you have mentioned earlier that the reason why you wanted to do multiple internships was because you wanted to get more experience. So can you elaborate on that a little bit more, please?
Definitely. So I think it's really important to get as much experience as you can, especially when you're still a student, especially when you haven't started full time yet. And it's also really important to continue building your connections too, just because, we all come into CSUN and we're all just starting out kind of building all these connections, and your network is your net worth. So that's why I think it's so important to just continue building on your connections. So when you're going through the recruiting process, you'll hear about all the good and bad stories from professionals wherever they go, whether it's mid-tier or big four, private.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Dung. That is definitely something I've always wanted to do, and you're totally living my dream. It's really good to know that you can do more than one internship. But to be honest, the one thing that held me back from applying for multiple internships is because I wasn't sure how the firms would feel about it. I have heard that it could be a little controversial, and I was never really sure, and that's kind of the reason why we wanted to talk about this today. So Tyler, what are your thoughts about this?
Recruiting with multiple firms can definitely be seen as controversial, so I'm really glad this is being brought up as well. Once again, as Dung mentioned earlier on, open communication with your recruiter is pretty much key. You want to keep them in the loop. Remember that the firms are investing time into you. They're investing resources, so you have to be very respectful of the fact that they are investing their time into you. And, you know, some firms may be okay with you doing multiple internships, whereas others might not be. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is to just not be shady and do it behind their back. You want to express your interest to pursue multiple opportunities for internships, whether that be to improve on your own experience or just to get a better feel of what a mid-tier firm might be like compared to a big four. That's totally fine. Those are valid reasons. Once again, pursuing multiple internships can be a very bold and potentially risky move, but if done right and professionally, it should be okay. Remember, you don't want to burn any bridges, so make sure that you are very respectful to the recruiters and to the firms, and just overall keep it professional.
Thank you so much for saying that. And to piggyback of what both Tyler and Dung just told us about the internships, I would just like to also mention that if you're planning on doing more than one, it is very important that you're mindful of the time. Make sure that you allow yourself more than one summer left, and make sure that you definitely keep the communication together. And it sounds like it's more than possible. And to be honest, I'm a little upset that I didn't do this earlier, but very happy for Dung once again, totally living my dream. So, so to wrap up this podcast, I would just like to shift gears towards talking about the application process. I know the anticipation could be a little stressful. And Michael, what are the steps for the application process?
The definitive source of information when it comes to the application process is the recruiters. The contact information of the recruiters should be one of the first things you get when you talk to a firm that interests you. Usually, firms recruit for internships in the fall and SLPs during the spring, although this is not always the case. There may be internships in the spring, although usually not SLPs in the fall. Applications can be found on Handshake and on the website of the firms that you're applying to. Make sure you have your resume, your cover letter, and your unofficial transcripts from every college you've attended ready. Deadlines can range from the day of Meet the Firms, which is about the fourth week of the semester, all the way to the end of the semester, although most of the applications are due between week 4 and week 8.
Right, Michael. So what are some tricky parts about the application process itself?
You would be surprised by how many people get tripped up by the application deadlines. When the semester starts at CSUN, it comes at you quick. You think that you have time to work on your applications because they're due 4 weeks after the beginning of the semester at the earliest, but you don't actually have 4 weeks. As application deadlines approach, the EY Center will be getting busier and busier, and they might not have enough time to go through the multiple revisions that your resume may need to get to perfection. You'll also be sending out your resume before actual applications during events such as AA's networking workshop, or perhaps in a follow-up email to a professional that you met during a noon meeting.
Okay, so thank you so much, Michael, for sharing that. And let me ask you, Dung, so what comes after the application process?
In my personal experience, after I submitted all my applications, it took around 1 to 2 weeks for me to hear back from the firms. But this kind of just varies depending on when the application deadline for these firms are, as well as their interviewing schedule.
All right, sounds good. And then let me ask you just one last thing. I know you previously had told me that in the process of the offers being extended, by the time that you already got some of the offers, you still had some upcoming SLPs. How did you go about that?
So in my personal experience, after I received my offers, I had about 2 months to make a decision on where I wanted to sign. But that also kind of depends on the firm and when their SLPs are. So there's some firms that might have their SLPs a little bit earlier, some might have it a little bit later. And if you run into a situation where you have an SLP after your deadline, so I'll definitely recommend reaching out to the firms and seeing if they could just extend your deadline or help you work on that, because you want to be able to give every firm an equal opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Tyler and Dung, for joining us today. Thank you so much for the input and sharing the experiences. We really appreciate that. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure to hit the like button. Next week, we'll go over maintaining professional skepticism, so you want to tune in. Go subscribe to our channel if you want to see more podcasts like this, and don't forget to hit the bell notification so you get notified every time we upload. And we'll see you next week.